pumpkin chicken and black bean soup with some quesadillas, and we're going to make a orange spice scone. I completely forgot. We're making an orange spice scone with a orange spice brown sugar glaze over it. So I'm kind of thinking of like, that orange spice tea that you get. That's the flavors that I'm going for in our scone. So let's see, what, I was going to start with our scone, but let's actually start by sauteing up our onions first. So we're going to move over here and we can get our onions going for our stew. And that way we'll have deliciousness cooking and caramelizing. So we're going to just kind of take off this whole outer layer of our onion here, and we'll dice this up here. And then we're going to add it into our little Dutch oven with a little bit of olive oil, and we will let that cook up and caramelize while we are prepping up our scone. I know, I was like, I haven't done a scone in a hot minute. And I was kind of debating doing like a cranberry orange scone, like a cranberry orange walnut, which I feel like is such a wintry flavor. But I was like, I want something a little more because I'm going to be making a cranberry orange sourdough bread later today. I'm going to whip up a couple batches of sourdough. So I was like, I want to do something a little bit different. Let me go grab my olive oil because I forgot it, of course. Apparently it's because it's my big bottle, and my big bottle doesn't fit in my cabinet, and so I have to keep it in my pantry. Here we go. So just about, a teaspoon and a half of olive oil, just enough to kind of put a small little coating on the bottom of our pan. Pull that out here, and then we're going to add in our onions. And then let me get my spoon. We're going to give it a quick stir, kind of coat the onions up in olive oil, and then we can start working on the dry part of our scones. So just give this a good coat. And then we're going to kind of cook this over medium heat, and we're going to let those start to caramelize up. Do a quick rinse to get any of that onion flavor off of my hands. And for the base of our scones, we're going to start by getting our dry ingredients together, and then we'll cut some cold butter into it. But we're going to start off with 2 cups of all-purpose flour.
Did you ever request if you could make French onion soup sometime?
Oh, you know what? That's really good. I love French onion soup. It's one of my favorite soups. So yes, I will definitely, I'll put that on the list. I need to buy more onions because when I was grabbing an onion for this, I'm like, I'm down to 2 onions. So it's ready for me to do my grocery shopping. Because even though I feel like I buy enough groceries to feed an army every single week, by the time the week goes over, everything is gone. You're like, where did all this food go? And my kids, no matter what, I can go grocery shopping, my kids will still tell me that there's no food in this house. And I'm like, there's so much food in this house. But if it's not the one food that they're craving in that exact moment, there's no food in the house. We're going to use a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. The brown sugar is going to give an extra kind of richness to these scones over granulated sugar, which is going to pair really well with the spices that we're going to do. Slide this over here. And then we are going to add in, we're going to do a 1/2 tablespoon of cinnamon. And then the other spices that I have are cloves, nutmeg, and allspice. You could also throw in there and ginger in there if you want, but I want it to taste more like the tea versus a gingerbread flavor. So we are going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of cloves because that's, I think, a flavor that really pops out in the orange spice tea. And then we're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of allspice. And we are going to use these spices again in our glaze that will add a bit more flavor on top of that. And then you're going to use just a smidge, kind of like a fourth of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Not a whole lot. Nutmeg has a lot of flavor in it, but a little bit. And I feel like nutmeg is kind of that polarizing flavor, so you either love it or you don't like it. If you don't like it, just omit it from it. We're going to do a half a teaspoon of salt and then 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Let's see. I might have to go get my other baking powder out. Okay. Let me go completely empty. Good thing. I always have more. So 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And then we're going to just kind of give this a good kind of mix together until they're all kind of dispersed throughout the flour. And then we're going to cut in a stick of cold butter. So we're just going to mix this up. Again, I'm just using my pastry cutter to kind of make sure all those ingredients are kind of dispersed throughout. And I didn't say the cloves just smell wonderful. Orange and cloves just remind me so much of the holidays. Okay. And this is what I'm grabbing. We're going to take a cold stick of butter. So make sure you just take it right out of the fridge, because the colder it is, the more flaky your scones are going to be. So you don't want it mushy or even like out for very long, because it does kind of warm up and it kind of just makes it to where when you're cutting it into it, it kind of smushes together more versus being, nice kind of crumbly. So I'm going to cut it down through fourths like this. This is just going to allow me to cut it easier into my flour mixture. Now, you can always go use like a food processor to cut the butter into it. I just find that this takes less work. By the time you get your food processor out and then you have to clean it, this is easier. On small scale, if I have to do a lot of scones, then yeah, it's the food processor. I'll definitely get that out for that. Or you can do 2 knives and kind of cut the dough up with, or the butter up with 2 knives and like cut it through there. Let's give our onions a quick stir. Or you can even go more old school, is where you kind of smush the butter between your fingers in the flour. So that's kind of a technique that you can do as well. But again, I have just one of these pastry cutters, which is like 5 knives. And I just kind of cut the butter up. And essentially, you just want to cut the butter until you have no pieces bigger than a pea. And that's just going to give you a nice kind of flaky, layered texture on it when we do our press and folds. Because if you leave too many big pieces of butter, you're going to have these like butter voids in there, which when they'll melt, and so it won't be a flaky layer. Okay. And I find when you are cutting, like doing the method of cutting the butter into the flour with a pastry cutter like this, having a bigger bowl is a lot easier than a smaller bowl, because it allows you to kind of just cut all over the like sides of it instead of having a small, deeper area to work with. Like the other day, I did 4 times my butter crust recipe, which makes, essentially one, base of the recipe makes 2, butter crusts. So, and it was for my chicken pot pies, and I just did it in the bowl. My bowl was not so big, so I kept it was falling everywhere, and it was just kind of chaos. But I was like, oh, we should have done a bigger bowl. It's just like when I make soup sometimes, and I'm like, why didn't I grab a bigger pot? Okay. And then just partially through, just take your knife, clear out any chunks of butter that have stuck between your blades, because we want those all incorporated into our scones so we can have just a delicious scone. Here. So just gonna kind of cut these up, and we're just about there. I'll say it's a good arm workout. It was so cold this morning that I opted not to go outside in the garage and work out, which is where I have like my machines and my weightlifting. And so I was like, you know what? We're going to do a throwback back to like the late 90s, working out at home. And I did, this Billy Blanks little workout. And my arms, I was like, gosh, these are hard. I remember how hard they were, but I made it through the 51 minutes of the fat burning Billy Blanks. And now my arms are like jelly today. So I was like, of course I did a more intense baking activity. But scones will be worth it. Especially because I feel like scones are like a perfect treat that aren't as sweet as a muffin or a cookie or a biscuit, you know what I mean? So you get that kind of a little bit of that sweet treat, but it's not overpowering. So give this, I'm going to turn my onions down now to just around a 4. We've got our butter cut into our flour. So now we're going to work on our wet mixture for this. Let me go grab a measuring cup. We are going to use a 1/2 cup of sourdough discard. Grab a spatula. So I fed up my starters this morning, so I have a bit of discard here to the side. We're going to do a 1/2 cup. And we'll add this into things, and then we'll add in 1 egg. And then I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. One, 2. And then we're going to do some orange zest. I'm going to save some or little cuties because I never have oranges, but I have cuties. They work the same. We're going to do I'm going to do 2 zested in here for that, and then we'll save some for our glaze. So we're going to zest it, and then we'll squeeze the juice into it as well. But zest first. But if you're going to use a full-size orange, you're going to want just one whole orange, the zest of 1 whole orange. Just don't zest it too much where you get too white of it, but just keep with a nice kind of top layer of the skin for it, or the peel. And that's going to give you just a really nice orange flavor throughout, because the juice that we add in isn't going to give it too much of a flavor. It will work well in our zest or in our glaze, but as far as in the scone, the zest is where it's coming from. So, well, good thing I didn't lose that one. They're not as easy to zest as the bigger ones, but my kids love these, so we always have them. They're easier for them to eat. They're sweeter too. So we're going to mix these in here, and then we're going to add in our cream for our little extra like liquid in the base of our scone. There we go. These are just a little bit tricky because you got to like hold them close enough. There we go. And okay. And then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. We will use a little bit more later to kind of coat over the top of it, but 2 right now. And this just gives us a little bit more liquid base to add into our scone. But again, our scone is not, we're going to have a dry shag when we mix it up. And then we'll squeeze the juice from both of these in here. Now, if you're using a full orange, you're just going to use juice from about a 1/2 of an orange, but these are a lot smaller. So they'll work well for it. Okay, I'll wash my hands real quick. And then we're gonna mix this up until we have it all kind of incorporated. And then we're gonna mix this into our dry ingredients, and then we'll do our press and folds, and then we'll shape it into 2 little pucks, and we'll cut them into little, and each puck into 8 pieces. And we'll brush them with a little bit of cream and sprinkle a little brown sugar over the top, bake them up, and then we're gonna make a really delicious kind of glaze to go on them. I'm going to do a brown sugar orange spice glaze, which I think will be lovely. Okay. So, and just slide this over here. I better put the top on my vanilla because if you know me, I'll knock this over. Okay, so here's our dry ingredients. We're just going to add our wet ingredients into our dry ingredients, and then we'll incorporate them. Again, our butter is cut into our flour, sugar, and spices. We have our baking powder in there as well. And then we're just going to mix this up until it forms kind of a dry shag. It won't be super wet, but we'll press and fold it to bring it together. So just lightly toss it. Don't mix it too much because, again, you don't want it to be a dense scone. You want it to be light and fluffy. So you see how we have this just dry shag forming? That is what we want. So I'm going to just take off all of that on our spoon. And then we're going to just flip this out onto our countertop here, and we're going to do our press and folds. So you want it to look dry like this because every time we press and fold our kind of wetter layers into it, that's going to create a really flaky layer, which will make it delicious. So we start by pressing down, and then you just simply kind of fold the crumbs over on top. And then after a couple rounds of press and folds, you're going to have it, it's all going to come together as if it's like a pie crust almost, or a biscuit. But this is why, again, you want to use cold butter, because if your butter's lukewarm, it's going to have, or if it's room temperature, it's going to smush together too much, and then you won't get the flaky layers. And then just keep piling those dry bits in between each layer because, again, those help them form. And whatever you do, do not knead. Just fold it over and press it down. Now we've got a good shape going here, so I'm going to divide this up into 2 pieces, and then we'll shape it into our puck and just simply kind of guide it into the shape that you want. So you don't have to do a circle. I like to do the puck shape because I like to cut it and make little like triangle scones, but you can also just cut this up and make little squares and bake them up. So I'm just going to essentially push it down, and I want it to be about 1.5 inches or so thick. So don't push it down too much because I like a good fat tall scone. Here we go. So we've got our first one shaped up. Now we're going to get this one. And just simply kind of guide it into the little circle. But just by pressing, not kind of, and like using your hands to shape it. But try not to knead it. Here we go. This is looking pretty good. Okay. Grab our baking sheet here. I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. So we're going to slice it under. So I'm going to use my thin pastry cutter. And we'll transfer each puck to our parchment paper. That's just going to allow for a cleaner, easier bake. And then we're going to go through and we're going to cut these each puck into 8 pieces. Now you can always make one big puck and then cut that into 8 pieces and then have 8 bigger scones. But I like having the little mini scones. I think they bake up a little bit nicer because you don't have to bake them as long. So they don't dry out as much. And, they're just cute. Who doesn't love a mini scone? And then once you have them cut, you're going to just pull them out so that they have a little bit of space between each one. Because again, these are going to grow in size. So you want them to be able to expand and cook up on both sides without baking together. And then we're going to brush before we bake them off. We're going to brush them with a little bit of cream and sprinkle a little bit of brown sugar over the top of them. Let me wash my hands up real quick.
You have a question? Do you have your recipes anywhere?
So I do send out recipe cards for my members a couple times a month. I should be having some coming out soon. And for everybody else, we upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So you should always be able to just go and watch them and recreate my recipes by just watching the video again, because I make sure I go through every single ingredient list and amount so that we can make each one. Let's see, where is my little basting brush? Here, we'll use this one. So we're going to put a little drizzle of cream in here. You need less than a tablespoon, but just enough to just splash the top of each one with it. So just a little dabby dab. This is going to help give it a nice kind of golden brown that keeps them a little bit moist too, instead of getting it too over crunchy on the top. So we're doing our little dabs. And then, there we go. Then we're going to add a little bit of sugar on them. Brown sugar gives them a little sweet crunch on it. So if you don't like to have the glaze, you can just eat them straight up, and that little extra sugar crunch just makes the flavor wonderful. And you don't need a lot of sugar. It's like a pinch per each one. We'll probably use less than, a tablespoon for all of these. There we go. Brush them around. And then I've got my brown sugar here. If you were to use, instead of brown sugar, if you wanted to use granulated sugar in here, you would just use that instead. But a little sprinkle over the top of each one. And then these are going to bake in the oven at 400 for 18 minutes. Here. Beautiful. Sprinkle these guys on. Perfect. So let's go pop these in the oven. Again, hardly any sugar goes on that top, but it does add just the perfect amount of sweetness. And we're going to bake these, our orange spice scones, at 400 degrees for 18 minutes. Slide them in there, always on that top rack. You don't want to bake them underneath anything. They need that top thing. Okay, let's go work on our soup, and then we'll make our quesadillas. Let me get some of that sugar off of there. Okay, we've got our onions at a perfect caramelization, just lovely, nice golden brown edges on them. So let's get our celery in here and we'll chop up our carrots and get some peppers in here. We're keeping it pretty simple on there. I'm going to use I'm saying pumpkin, but I'm actually using buttercup squash puree that I have from the buttercup, not butternut, but buttercup squash I roasted last week. We're going to use some of that in the base of there. It tastes pretty much the exact same as pumpkin, but it's going to add as a nice flavor that's going to just work with the spices, make the broth base a little bit thicker, and I think it's just going to complement the chicken and the black beans. So it's just a fun kind of winter fall twist on the classic chicken and black bean soup. So we've got our celery in here. Give this a good stir. And then I have 3 carrots. We're going to peel up and we will dice and have those saute up. I'm going to use shredded rotisserie chicken for this. Good old Costco's, you know, how you can get the like 2.5 pound pack of it. I love that stuff because it is great for making just like quick soups for lunch or whatnot. So we're going to use that. And here. And then we're also going to add some sweet peppers into our soup as well. You could add like a jalapeno if you wanted the spice, but I like to keep mine more on the mild side. Okay, we're going to take our tops off, take the bottoms, and then for the fatter parts, I'm going to quarter them or cut them into thirds so that they cook up fairly quickly. Our carrots are kind of our densest vegetable going in this soup, so cutting them up smaller will allow them to get tender a little bit faster. And get these guys. Now, when I do my regular like chicken and black bean soup, I always use carrots in it as well. It just adds great flavor, and the little pop of orange just contrasts with the black beans. So it just is always kind of nice pop of color. Here, get these guys, and we'll get those tossed in there. And then I have 1 yellow bell pepper and 2 small red sweet peppers to throw in there as well. Okay. We're going to give this a good stir and kind of coat it up. And okay, we've got that. Let's get our peppers going. We're going to kind of pull out our seeds here. I always like to give them a good tap down to get any excess out. We can pop out our stem, and we're going to dice these up and we'll add them in. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to saute up our little veggies that we're going to go into the soup. Then we're going to mix in our spices and our pureed roasted squash to kind of make this nice seasoned paste base before we add in our chicken bouillon and water. And then we'll add in our corn and our black beans and our shredded chicken to kind of simmer all together. I'm going to cut my bell peppers up, nice little, like, cube it up. That way you can get a whole bunch when you get a nice spoonful. And then we're going to make, after we get this kind of simmering here in a little bit, we will work on our quesadillas. And we're going to work on our glaze for our scones. But this is going to be a very hearty black bean and chicken soup because that using the buttercup squash, or if you want to use pumpkin puree or anything like that, it really makes the base of the soup a lot more dense and just hearty, so a lot more filling. And I feel like the squash really complements those kind of earthy tones that we're going to be using, you know, the chili powder and a little bit of cumin, oregano, some taco seasoning, just really blends it all well together. And just do a couple of dense chops over. That way we can toss these in and let them start to simmer. I'm going to bring my Dutch oven now up to about a 6 because it's starting to get a little bit down. We want it to sizzle a little bit more as we add in some of these colder veggies. Keep the heat up. And it's going to have a lot of fun, pretty colors in there. Okay, I'm going to turn it up a little bit more. Okay, let's get to making our kind of seasoned paste for this. So this again is my roasted buttercup squash. Let me grab a spoon for it. Buttercup squash, not to be confused with butternut. Butternut has kind of a peachy color on the outside and a, you know, a bright orange flesh. Buttercup is short and squat and much bigger and thicker. It's got a really deep color inside, which is very deep and rich, and it's a bit thicker. So we're going to add a couple scoops of this in here. I'm going to add about a cup to make our base. That should be around a cup. And when I take the squash, when you get it from the store, I just cut it in half, de-seed it, flip it upside down, and roast it with that kind of the flesh on the pan for about 45 minutes to an hour at 350 until it's really soft and tender. But you're essentially going to mix this in there and treat it just like it would be like a tomato paste, where we're going to just coat all these vegetables up, and then we're going to add in the spices and let them kind of heat up and really infuse themselves in that buttercup squash puree. And that's going to thicken up the base of our soup, so it's going to be a really nice, thicker texture than if you were to use just the broth base. Okay, let me spread this out. We're going to get our spices going. Okay. We've got oregano. We're going to use about a teaspoon of dried oregano. About a half a tablespoon of ancho chili powder. I like ancho, but you could use regular chili powder. Ancho is a bit more smoky, has some nice flavors to it. We're going to use, I've got some Mrs. Dash's taco seasoning blend, which is just a taco seasoning blend that has no salt in it. We're going to use about a teaspoon of this. We're going to use half a teaspoon of ground cumin. Gives it a little bit of an earthier taste to it. And then, because you need a little bit of heat, but not so much if you're me, but just the teeniest amount, we're going to use a small amount of red, cayenne pepper.
You have a question? Do you know what you're making for dinner tonight?
I am not 100% sure yet, but nope, I have no idea. Yeah, I've got to go figure it out. I was going to say there, and I'm like, I do have some beef shanks that I need to use, but we had a beef chuck roast last night, so I'm not sure I'm going to use that for dinner tonight, but I'm still formulating that plan. I got to go grocery shopping, so I'm kind of limited on my proteins right now for what we're going to make or what protein we're going to have, but it's still coming too. I do have some Italian sausage and ground beef, so I might do something, along the line with that, but I'm not sure yet. So we've got our spices kind of mixed in here. You can see it's already turned our, our buttercup squash puree, this rich kind of reddish color. That's from that ancho chili powder. Beautiful. Now we're going to add in our water, and then we'll add in a big scoop of chicken bouillon. I'm got 4 cups here, but I'm not sure I'm going to use it all. So we're just going to add a little by little. We're going to add in 1 cup at a time, and then we'll mix it up until we get kind of mixed together and to the consistency that I want. But always just little by little, incorporate it, allows it to kind of heat up, and then you're not just putting a bunch of cold liquid in there. Here we go. Add another cup. And I'm just making sure I've got all of those little spices, veggies coming around. Make sure you scrape the bottom of your pan, get any bits that have kind of toasted on there, because they'll bring a lot of flavor into your broth. Add a little more. You can see it's just going to have just a nice hearty richness to it. Oops, looks like I made a mess like usual. Let me grab that real quick. Give it a good stir. And I think I'm going to just stick with about 3 cups, because I feel like 3 cups is giving me the perfect kind of consistency that I want. So I've added in 3 cups of water, and then we're going to do a nice scoop of our chicken bouillon. So let me grab a spoon for that. And then we're going to let that simmer for a little bit. We'll taste it and simmer, and then we're going to add in, I'll add in my corn now and our black beans, and then we'll add in our chicken a little bit closer towards the end. So we've got our heaping spoonful of chicken bouillon. Make sure, we'll let this simmer. And then give it a quick taste. Make sure I don't need to add any more in, because sometimes with squash you need a little bit more because you have a bit more that you're flavoring up. I think I'll add a little bit more in. Let me rinse it. Okay. And that should be good. Okay. Let's add our corn in here. I've got about a cup or so of frozen corn. And then we're going to let this come to a nice simmer, and then we're going to add in our black beans and our chicken. I always add my chicken in towards the very end because it's pre-shredded, and if you add it in too soon, what will happen is it kind of falls apart in there, and I don't want it to kind of completely fall apart. Okay, let's work on our quesadillas here. Flip this over and use a more dry side of it. We're going to put a little bit of shredded chicken in our quesadilla as well, so I'm just open this up on here. But this is the good old stuff that you get from Costco, and it is the best. So let me grab my room temperature butter over here so we can spread it on our quesadillas. And we're going to keep our quesadillas pretty simple today. I'm going to use we're just going to use some store-bought tortillas and avocado, some shredded chicken, and then I've got some pepper jack cheese, so give it a little bit of heat, as well as some just white cheddar, because I love a good cheddar quesadilla. I'm going to spread some butter on just one side of each tortilla, really, really thin, but it's just going to allow it to kind of crisp up nicely. That's why you want to use room temperature butter. And you use hardly any. Okay. And I'm going to get my pan starting to warm up over here. Put it right over just a medium. Let's start with our pepper jack cheese. We'll grate some over that. This will add a little bit of spice to it. I can't handle full pepper jack because I am such a spice baby, but we'll do a combination of both. So we'll add a nice layer. And let me pull it out just a little bit more. You can see the little pepper spices in there, but it gives you a little bit of heat, which will be nice. So we're going to do that. And then I'm going to add some of our shredded chicken in here. Again, this is already pre-cooked shredded chicken, so you don't have to worry about that. We'll add it just to shred it around a little bit, just to add a nice little bit of chicken to it and a little pop of flavor. Wash my hands. Give our soup a quick stir here. We're just going to let this simmer for just a second. Once it comes to a good boil, then we'll know to add our beans in. And then we are going to add in some avocado. If your avocado is nice and ripe, you should be able to peel the skin off of it fairly easily. And that's going to allow you to chop it up nicely versus trying to scoop it out and then slice it up. So we'll slice through it. And that way I can kind of cube it and we can have just little avocado bits throughout our quesadilla. And then we'll grate a little bit of the other cheese, our sharp cheddar, over the top of it. And that's, see, the spice from the pepper jack and the saltiness of the cheese should give a good amount of flavor in there. And then what I personally love to do with my quesadillas is to dip them into the soup. So you get just a lot more flavor. And then I've got a little bit of some sharp cheddar that will grate over the top of this. And you know what? Let's go grab our scones out of the oven and then we can finish up these. Okay, so we have our orange spiced scones, and they are sourdough scones. I kind of made their flavor based off of the orange spice tea. So we have some cloves, cinnamon, all of that. They are looking awesome. You can see how big we have some of those layers. They popped up and actually tipped over because they're so flaky. But just look at this gorgeous flaky layer right there. Just amazing. So again, this is our orange spice chai. There you go. But we're going to make a lovely brown sugar and orange spice glaze that will drizzle over the top of these in just a second. But they smell amazing. They've got this nice kind of Christmassy smell to it. I'll slide these over. But that press in the folds, you can see those flaky layers. That is from where we build this dough up over and we press it down. And they just gives it so many soft, wonderful layers, just like in a lovely butter pie crust. Okay. Let's get a little bit more cheese grated over the top of these. We'll get them toasting up on our skillet here. Then we'll add our black beans in, and then we'll add our shredded chicken in. We'll make our glaze. I'm going to transfer these guys. We can get 2 on here. And I'm just going to cook them over medium heat. I don't want to toast them up too high. We're going to melt our butter over here for our glaze. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. So for this glaze that we're going to make, we need just about 2 tablespoons of butter. So we're just going to heat it until it's melted. Then we'll mix in the brown sugar. and a little bit of cream and a little bit of orange zest and orange, like the juice from it. And then our powdered sugar, and that will give us, and then our spices will give us a great flavor. And melt the butter first, then remove it from heat and add the brown sugar. You don't want the butter and the brown sugar to kind of caramelize together. Okay, we are going to add in our black beans. Now there's two kind of ways to do the black beans. If you buy the black beans in the seasoned sauce, then I always pour the whole sauce of the beans in the pan with my soup. These are just in black beans in plain water or flavored. So what you're going to want to do with these is you're going to want to strain them. Let me grab my strainer out and give them a quick rinse because they'll have no extra flavor. But the ones that have been stewed in the sauce add really great flavor to the sauce or the soup. And then you're just going to give them a quick rinse. Here. Now, if you don't love black beans, but you love like a white bean, like a Great Northern bean or a cannellini bean, those are also really great in this soup as well. They're not quite as strong in flavor. So we've got our beans in there. We'll mix that in. Beautiful. And then we're going to add in our shredded chicken here. And a little swirl. Help that butter melt evenly. Now we're not going to use all of this shredded rotisserie chicken because there's a lot in here. I'm just going to use about a pound or so of shredded rotisserie chicken in our soup. But we're going to want to give it a coarse little chop up before we do because they come in some pretty big chunks like that. And so that's not really edible. Like it's not really easy to eat if you leave it that way. I'm going to turn off my heat on my pan here. And we'll let our butter just residually melt for the rest part. But let's give our chicken a quick little chop over so we can add it into our soup. Now you can always cook up your own chicken and then you could use that broth into your soup as well. Okay. I'm going to add it in here. And for right now, I'm just going to dip it under. I'm not going to stir it yet. I'm just going to dip it under, let it bring in those flavors and soak up. Again, with the pre-shredded chicken, if you stir it too much, it will continue to break apart. So I always like to minimize that.
You have a question? Can you find that chicken in the deli?
So I get this chicken from Costco, which is when they have like those pre-packaged stuff, they always have it like right next to their salads. But at a regular grocery store, I don't know if you can buy the cold pre-shredded chicken, but you can always buy a rotisserie chicken and shred it yourself for it. But I haven't seen like it already pre-shredded at the store. But I only ever look for it at Costco, so maybe not the best judge of that. Although, they might have it in the deli. I'm not sure. Okay, we're going to add in so we have 2 tablespoons of butter, and we're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. There we go. And then I'm going to get my whisk here, and we'll whisk it together. I'm going to get another bowl because we're going to make it in another bowl, but I like the heat of my pan to get the brown sugar melting. There we go. But just don't cook it over the stove too long. You can add it in, but it doesn't take more than a minute for your brown sugar to turn into a candy or like a caramel almost. And if you get to that, you just have to start over because it just won't work. But you want to use it to kind of melt the sugar and to dissolve it so that your brown sugar glaze has a smoother texture. Okay, we're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of cream. This is going to give a richness to it that is just lovely.
You got a comment that that's the perfect size pan for butter. What else do you use it for?
Pretty much butter and sauces. If I have just a small little reduction that I need to make, or like a glaze on a thing, that's exactly what I have. I have it that size, and then I have one that is slightly larger. So I think that's a cup and a half. And then I have one that's 2 cups. And I love them because they're perfect for those small things that you need to melt or heat, but you don't want to use like a bigger stock pot or like a sauce pot on. I know they're also like if you're making like a homemade barbecue sauce or whatnot, or a glaze that you need to baste over something, but it needs to stay warm. It's a great thing for. Okay, we're going to zest up our 2 kind of oranges here, or cuties. And then we're going to flip our quesadillas here in just a second because it should be nice and heated up here. Now you can also use a regular orange for this as well. Let's see how beautiful. Whoop. Perfect. Let's set this one. That one wasn't over the burner quite as much, but that's a-okay. We'll toast it a little bit more on the other side. Rotate it and get it right there. Okay, we're going to add a little bit of spices into this as well. And then we'll add our fresh orange juice in it, but I want to do that last. Let's do about a teaspoon of cinnamon. So a little shaky shake. A very small amount of cloves, like 1/4 of a teaspoon, because cloves are strong. So if you add too much, you'll definitely know it. And the same part, just a smidge of our allspice. And then for this, I actually leave out the nutmeg because you need such a small amount that it's just hard to measure without going over on it. And then let me grab, there's my knife. We're going to add some of our, squeeze in our fresh orange. And then we'll mix this up, and then we're going to add in our powdered sugar to make the rest of our glaze component. So we zested these 2 guys, and now we're going to squeeze them in. Okay, let me turn this down. I'm going to turn my stew down now to low because we've got a nice, beautiful boil, and I'm going to give it a good stir. Just looking wonderful. And let's check our quesadillas. Once your skillet gets hot, they cook up pretty quickly. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to slide these guys off over here onto another cutting board. That way they'll be ready to cut up and serve in just a second. And I always say, when you make quesadillas and you serve them, let them sit for about a minute or 2, because if you try to cut them right away, your melted cheese floods out. I have learned that many times by putting that, and then all of my cheese ends up on the cutting board and not in, on my quesadilla. Okay, let's mix in our base here. So this is kind of our base for our glaze, and then our last component is our powdered sugar. It's a lot richer and thicker than you think, so you're not going to add quite as much as if you had just having a orange juice based glaze, because that cream and that butter and the brown sugar already in there constitutes a lot. So we're probably only going to need about a 1/2 cup of powdered sugar max. We're going to add about a 1/4 first, and then we'll whisk it together. And this is a very rich glaze that is just wonderful. It has so much flavors. And as you can just see, those spices give it such a nice and dark color to it, with the brown sugar, the cloves, and the cinnamon, and the allspice. Add a little bit more. We're looking for about the consistency of glue. So you want it to be thick enough that you can just drizzle it nicely. And we'll drizzle this a little bit more. I think we're going to be right at a 1/2 cup, like I thought. And then we're going to drizzle this over our scones, and then we're going to be ready to serve up. Here we go. Beautiful. And I find a whisk gives you such a good smooth texture on your glaze. Slide this guy over here. Let's glaze these scones and then we'll be ready to serve up. Move it a little bit closer. Okay. So we're just going to drizzle our glaze over the top of each one of our scones. Now, if you really like a thick coating on it, you could dip the top ones in, but I find a drizzle gives you that good flavor without overpowering it. And you have this nice, the orange flavor, the cloves, the cinnamon, the brown sugar. So it's just got this nice, rich, but sweet, but a little bit of that tang in there. Again, just reminds me of that orange spice tea that you get in the winter. Beautiful. Okay. Let me grab our ladle out here for our stew. Looking fantastic. We're just about ready to serve this up. Get out everything and we've got quite the mess already. Let me grab a plate and a little bowl. I'll get my little cauldron here. Okay. Let's see. For lunch today, we will be having our buttercup squash and black bean and chicken soup. We seasoned it with ancho chili powder, cumin, a little bit of taco seasoning. We have corn, celery, carrots, peppers, and buttercup squash puree in it. We are going to top it with a little bit of grated sharp cheddar cheese just to add a great bit of flavor and cheesiness to it. And then we are going to serve it with our chicken and avocado quesadilla filled with our pepper jack cheese and our sharp cheddar. And then, of course, for dessert, we will have a nice sweet taste of our orange and spiced scones where we season. We have this lovely spice from the cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and allspice with that orange flavor to just give you just a nice kind of Christmassy flavor in every bite. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos into the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my cutting boards, my Dutch ovens, my bakewares, knives, all the different things that I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining.